Hello, 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 loves. Okay, welcome to Why Am I Like This Wednesday. So, if you haven't subscribed, do so now. If not, it's totally okay. I may not be for everyone, and that's okay. Also, don't forget to like, even if it's in the middle or towards the end. And don't forget to share if you feel that this would somehow help somebody else. So, today's topic is something I'm sure I'm going to talk more about throughout the time of me doing my Why Am I Like This Wednesdays, because I don't think you ever stop trying to learn about yourself and understand why am I like this. So one of the things I wanted to say, I did a little research. I have not done enough. I don't think you can ever do enough research when it comes to childhood trauma. But I did see, excuse me, that if you have experienced childhood trauma before the age of 8, you will be more impacted than if it happens to you after that. It's not to say that anybody who's experienced any form of trauma after that is not affected tremendously, because you are. There's just something that happens with the child development stages and their brain development through that, before that age, that affects you differently. Trauma for a child will affect their health as they get older. Things like gastritis, there's just stomach issues. You are more likely to have stomach issues. You're more likely. So let me read one of the things that I found, because a handy dandy Google came in clutch. I was just trying to figure some things out. I'm gonna try not to get emotional, but this is triggering for me. One of the things that came up was, according to the Cleveland Clinic, traumatic events in a child's life are often referred to as adverse childhood experiences. Some ACEs are clearly terrifying, such as abuse, witnessing extreme violence, or surviving a natural disaster. But kids see the world differently than adults do and can experience distress from things that might not seem so scary to grown-ups. Pause. Stop telling your kids that they shouldn't react or respond to a situation that affected them mentally because you can't understand it. Stop invalidating your child's feelings. Okay? I'm gonna leave it there for now. I lost my place. Events like chronic bullying at school, the death of a family member, a divorce can also traumatize a child. Parents should be mindful that even though an event might not seem traumatic to them, it may have been traumatic for their child. Children who experience an adverse event before the age of 8 may be particularly vulnerable to trauma. It is important to note that many children who experience an adverse event don't have long-lasting effects. However, some factors increase the chance of later problems, such as the level of trauma, duration of trauma, and age of the child when the trauma occurs. Okay. Okay. So here it also says, the Clinic of Cleveland says, children who experience traumatic events have a greater chance of developing health conditions, including anxiety, cancer, depression, diabetes, heart problems, obesity, post-traumatic stress disorder, Why did it take me somewhere else? I didn't want to do that. And other things, of course. It was triggering for me. For one, reading that it says children who experience an adverse event before the age of 8 may be particularly vulnerable to trauma. Also, obesity. I have struggled with my weight since I was 10 or 11. And I don't know, to be honest, why that is. I do feel that I may use food as something that makes me happy temporarily, because I really do enjoy cooking and I love to see others happy when I cook for them and they enjoy what I've made them. I'm not an overeater. I, at one point, would go to Overeaters Anonymous meetings, and I never felt so different when I went to those meetings, because there were people there who are overeaters, and when they would share their stories, I would think to myself, holy cow, like my heart went out to them. To have to put your food in the trash and put soap over it so you would not go in the trash to eat your food. From visiting multiple McDonald's because you have an addiction to French fries and you don't want to be recognized at the window, to people who overeat but they don't seem to gain weight, so they have body dysmorphia on top of overeating, knowing that what they're overeating isn't healthy for them. So their body on the outside may appear to be fine, but internally it's not. There's just so many different things as I sat there and listened to everyone that I didn't even want to share my story, because I didn't feel like my story was anything similar to anyone else's in there. I felt very just not part of the group. But an eating disorder is an eating disorder, and I know I have one. I don't know. I when I was younger, I was bulimic. I was also anorexic. I was bulimia, anorexia. I've struggled with stomach issues since I could remember. And when I started to do research on childhood trauma and the brain development, I realized or found that part of that is during the time that your body is growing and developing, when you go through the trauma that is that traumatic at that time, it affects that growth. It almost stunts it, if that makes sense. So it interrupts the process, the natural process that your body should go through, had that trauma not presented itself when it did, if that makes sense. And the sad part about that is you can take care of yourself. You can eat healthy. You can work out. You can do everything right, but you're still going to slightly suffer from those issues. And it's because it was affected. It was stunted. So when I stopped to think about being overweight and having a not the best relationship with food, I run into being disappointed that was taken from me. That wasn't my choice. And now I'm held responsible for how I handle it and how I decide to fix it the best that I can, even though it was out of my control at some point. Does that make sense? So you run into having to fix somebody else's problem, which in turn is now your problem. And when I say problem, that's like an understatement. I think I hear my husband and my son. So, rightfully so, this entire process of allowing yourself grace during the healing process is exhausting. It really is. It is draining. And I never hear people really talk about how easy it is to just stay in that comfort zone of being whoever it is that you became after all of your trauma, than to try and understand it and become a better version of yourself after the trauma. I think sometimes I still hold on to who could I have been? What could have happened to me? What type of person I would have been? Would I have an eating disorder? Would I be overweight? Would I be insecure in certain aspects of my life? Would I be such a perfectionist? Would I have depression as severely as I do? Like, what would my life be without that trauma? And it's not one traumatic event, one traumatic experience. It was being kidnapped twice. It was seeing my grandmother literally say that she would give her life for me when a gun was put to her head. It was having a mother who was an addict and feeling unwanted and unworthy. It was growing up with relatives who were addicts. It was having relatives jealous of you and treat you a certain way because of what happened to you, and they somehow felt that you were given special treatment because you were sexually abused by your father for 3 years. You know, there weren't adults in their lives to explain to them that it wasn't special treatment. It was the process of what needed to happen because of what happened to me. But in a child's eyes, it looks as if it's favoritism. And there were no right-minded adults at the time to look at them and say, no, that's not the case. This happened to her and she has to go through therapy. This is why she looks at things differently. This is why her experiences are different. This is why she reacts to things differently. This is why she has panic attacks in front of everybody. This is why she has anxiety in front of everybody. This is why she's a people pleaser. Like, there was no adults in my life or even my cousins' lives at the time that they were younger to help them understand. So when you have experienced so much trauma before the age of 8 and you get help, because I did have help when it came to being sexually abused by my father for 3 years. But see, this is a problem. And this is me also telling you, do not put your children in therapy as if you are concerned for their mental health and then limit them to what they can say in therapy. Because what you are limiting them to say in therapy is most likely why they need therapy. I remember being really angry that my mother was still an addict. I remember being really confused that they ever let me go with my father. I remember being so confused that other relatives of mine had weird behaviors that I couldn't understand or make sense out of, because my grandmother used to say, they're sick. She never said they have a drug problem. She never said they're addicts. She never said they're alcoholics. She never said their drug of choice is heroin. She never said their drug of choice was meth. Like, I never knew any of that. And even when I was 13 and 14, which was, I feel, an old enough age to at least start explaining those things to me, they didn't do that. So there came a time where I figured it out, But then by doing that, you allow the child to make sense of it however their brain decides to make sense out of it. And what my brain did was, drugs are more important than me. Drugs matter more than I do. What does that drug have? And what does that drug give you that I can't give you? So at that time, and for years after, I always felt like I wasn't enough because nobody explained it to me. So when I say do not limit your children as into what they could say when they're in therapy, don't do that to them. That was done to me. So in therapy, I was able to talk about anything that happened at my dad's and on my dad's side of the family. That was, go ahead, mama, whatever you want to say. But my trauma didn't stop there. I went from being sexually molested by my father for 3 years to going to my grandmother, who unintentionally would make me feel bad for missing my cousins and on my dad's side and wanting to have a relationship with that side of my family still. That I knew them for 3 years. And when I stopped to think about it, I was with them from when I was born until I was almost 2. I lived with my aunt for about 9 months on my father's side, who they wanted to eventually adopt me. My mother took me to New York for my grandmother to pick me up from Puerto Rico and take me to Puerto Rico for 3 years. And then my dad comes and I'm with them for 3 to 4 years. We don't know the exact number. Everybody was under the influence around that time and they don't remember. So technically, until the age of 8, I had spent most of my life with my father's side of the family. And I realized that literally like yesterday. I spent more time with that side of the family at my most impressionable ages during my development process. And I was expected to not care. It's fine. You can talk about that family as much as you want, but don't talk about. It's fine. You could talk about that family as much as you want, but don't talk about us. So going into therapy and not being able to talk about how I felt about my mom coming and going, making promises that she didn't keep, seeing her randomly get angry and upset out of nowhere and me not fully understanding it, having her threaten me when I was 9 and 10 years old, not in a way as if, not in an abusive way, not in a physically abusive way, but a mentally abusive way where it was, if you don't listen to me or you don't do that, I'm going to take you away from your grandma and you're going to have to live with me. And let me tell you, I did not want to live with my mom. I did not. So I was taught to people please very early on, and even after I did the people pleasing for my father, and I had to act as if nothing was wrong around my relatives on my father's side, I left that situation to come to another situation where I still had to protect the adults around me. And when I went to therapy, don't talk about it. So at what point was I supposed to learn or figure out how to handle what I was going through if I was limited on what I could talk about or deal with or figure out? Like, it's just, it sucks. Knowing that my developmental stages were impacted because of the sexual abuse by my father, I get very emotional when I think about it, because You took away my innocence. You took that away from me. And I didn't deserve it. And I was a child. And I was a little over 5 when it started. And what's hard is when you become a mother, each stage of the trauma that you experienced when you look at your children, it's triggering. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that, or I've actually never heard someone talk about that. Every time my kids hit 5.5 until they were 8, I was triggered by the interactions they had with their father, by the interactions they had with any male in my family. Even if I trusted them, it was also this constant fear of what could happen to them. And then there was a form of jealousy and resentment that I would look at them and see what I could have been had I had a mother who was present and a father who loved me unconditionally. You shouldn't be jealous of your kids, but I am. I'm so jealous. I look at them and they're just so pure and innocent, and it's like, God, how awesome is that? How awesome is that? To just live. And this is what I was able to realize in therapy yesterday, that I know I'm not healed, and I know I'm not done being angry, because I'm still so fucking angry. I am so angry. I can't even hold my tears back. I'm angry. And I'm still stuck in the whole, it's not fair. It's not fair. And I don't know. I don't know why I can't just move on. And I hate when I hear people say, and that happened so long ago, can't you just let it go? No, you can't. Not something like that. And not something that didn't stop. Not something that you... I had a toxic relationship with my mother until maybe 5 years ago. Yeah. She's been clean for a really long time. But our relationship was very, very toxic. And it was toxic because I hadn't forgiven her. And to be honest, I thought I did. I do feel genuinely that I have forgiven my mother for giving me to my father. Because I genuinely feel that her intentions were pure. I don't feel like she just gave me to him because she was trying to get rid of me, although a part of me does feel that way, and she has admitted to me that she wasn't in the right mindset because of her addiction. But she said, I wasn't trying to not be your mother. I just thought that he was a better choice for you because he adored you. And that's another thing. It's hard for me to fully grasp and understand. And he's not here anymore for me to ask because he died last year in jail. Not for what he did to me, but he was a lifer because he was like wanted by the FBI and something about guns, and I didn't look into it and I don't care. I was glad he was in there. Every time I looked on the sex offenders website and I would see his picture, right next to it, it would say incarcerated, and I didn't care what he was incarcerated for. I did, however, always look to see if he had ever done anything to anybody else. And from his police records, he, at least nobody ever reported it. I'm not sure if I was his first or last victim. I'll never know that because he's not here for me to ask. And to be honest, I don't think he would have told me. I had to testify against him because he said that I was a lying, spoiled brat and that I was wrong in what I was saying. But does anybody who sexually abuses their child or sexually abuses any child just sit there and say, yeah, I did it? So wanting closure from that would be unrealistic, but it's not to say that I still wish I had it. I still do, 100%. But I have to learn to forgive myself for blaming myself for still allowing a lot of things to happen to me after a certain age. Like there are certain situations that I put myself in or that I was put in where I should have been my own advocate. I should have protected myself and I didn't. And I know why I didn't. And even though I know why, I'm still angry with myself for not doing it. So I need to learn to forgive myself. I need to learn to give myself grace. So I'm saying this to you. It's not easy. But you have to learn how to forgive yourself. Because the things that you allowed to happen to you were the long-term effects of what you didn't have control over that happened to you as a child, or even a young adult or a teenager. My trauma didn't stop till, to be honest, if I'm being 100% honest with myself, it didn't stop till 2019. I have continued to allow toxic behavior around me until 2019. That's when I just had enough. And I'm not sure if I had enough because I recognized that behavior that I allowed in my life would affect my children, or if I did it for myself. I don't know if I did it for myself or if I did it for my children and it just affected me. But whatever the case is, I did it. And I now feel more strong than I think I have ever felt. I feel confident within myself, even though I'm not happy with my body right now. Mentally, I feel better because I know I am taking the right steps to better myself. So when I say that this is one of those, why am I like this Wednesdays? It's why have I not fully forgiven myself? Why have I not forgiven those around me who are still indirectly a part of my life, I guess? Why have I not forgiven them? Why does it matter so much to me that they care about me? And I need to learn and accept that they're not me. And that's what my therapist told me. Stop expecting them to be who you are. You're an empathetic person who is understanding, you're open-minded, and that is just not who they are. And they might never be that. So understand when I tell you this, who you want in your life, either you accept them for who they are, or you set boundaries and limit the access they have to your life, or you remove them completely. But do not, under no circumstances, affect your growth for the lack of somebody else's. Don't do that. It will set you back a lot. So on that note, yeah, I'm still gonna work on it. I'll get back to you on my process on forgiving myself and healing more and trying not to be so angry. And my therapist said, so part of my anger, I'm going to leave you guys with this. Part of my anger and frustration is I have this unrealistic expectation of what my healing process should look like, and I'm not where it should be. However, my therapist told me it's like a scab. I'm trying to pick the scab before it's fully healed and it just falls off. And the analogy was perfect, because when she said that, I thought to myself, oh, I'm trying to rip that sucker off and let it bleed a little bit, and then let's try again later. You know, like at least part of it is a little healed, and then we'll just work on that little part later. Do you know? And I think that's what it is that I want. And it's an unrealistic expectation. And I shouldn't even have an expectation of what my healing process should look like, because everyone's looks different. And why am I setting myself up for failure? It's almost like I don't think I'm going to reach that finish line. So if I set myself up for failure, I'll feel better about it. Why am I like that? Still learning. Sometimes these little sessions, we're just going to talk about the things that we're trying to overcome and that we're dealing with and we're experiencing. And down the line, you'll see another episode or recording or whatever you want to call it of me talking about how I'm getting better at it, how I'm not as angry, or how certain situations don't trigger me as much. But for now, still angry. Still haven't forgiven a lot of people in my life. I still hold a lot of resentment and anger. But it's a work in progress. And I have to continue to tell myself that it's a work in progress, and I will probably never be done working on myself. And it's okay to not be okay. Did you hear me? It is okay to not be okay. With that said, have an amazing Thursday tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Remember to be patient with yourself. Remember to be as open-minded with yourself as you are with others. Remember, when you're giving advice to someone, to truly listen to the advice that you're giving and ask yourself if you are following the advice that you're giving to someone else. love yourself, be kind to yourself, and I will see you next week. I hope everyone has an amazing Thanksgiving. I hope you stuff your face and you don't feel guilty about it. I'm still not there yet. That's another one of my issues. And that you spend it with loved ones that truly appreciate you and understand you, or if they don't understand you, they take the time to try to understand you. I hope that if you don't have anyone to spend Thanksgiving with, that you spend it with yourself and you enjoy that you have yourself to spend it with. You appreciate yourself. Know that you are loved, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.